Let's discuss logging in this video. We can start with the definition. What is logging? Logging can be thought of many different ways, but especially in security and information assurance, it has direct relation to accounting. Do you remember the triple A's of access control? Authentication, authorization, and the third one was accounting. In order for you to be able to do effective accounting, logging is critical. So accounting has a lot to do with logging. And logging is also a basis for producing an audit trail, meaning when an incident occurs, if you want to be able to somehow trace the activities of that particular incident, log data is essential, and one or more pieces of log data put together to trace the incident is called an audit trail. So log data is definitely therefore critical in creating an audit trail. Therefore, you can also say that logging provides evidence for any potential criminal cases associated with a security incident. As we just talked about in our discussion of an audit trail, logging is helpful in reconstructing events to support any sort of prosecution, so in a criminal case. And one thing to remember is just creating a log doesn't really do anything, so you also need to worry about monitoring the log or reviewing the log. So unless you actually review the logs on a regular basis, logging itself doesn't really do anything. So logging actually goes hand in hand with monitoring. What does logging actually capture? First of all, details on events, especially security incidents, such as what, when, where, who, and how. So when an incident occurs, you want to collect information of what actually happened, when did it happen, where it happened, and who was behind that incident, and how that incident actually occurred. These are the details you're very interested in finding out, and a lot of times log records capture these pieces of information you really need. So to give an example, on Windows operating systems you have something called Event Viewer that shows different types of events happening on your operating system in general. So Event Viewer is probably the primary tool used on Windows systems. However, on other platforms such as Linux or Unix based systems, you get to see some different tools such as syslog or syslog-ng and so on. And it is always critical to somehow manage the log messages being generated by many hosts in a network. So a lot of times you really have to have a centralized log management system. One thing to remember here is, in order for logging to be credible, you have to make sure your identification and authentication processes are securely done. Otherwise, it is possible for a person to impersonate another person, or for a subject to impersonate another subject. So making sure your identification and authentication processes are securely done is what makes your logging more credible and probably less susceptible to any doubts. Since log data is being used even in criminal cases, protecting the integrity of log data is critical, especially to make sure the integrity of log data. So to ensure integrity of log data, one thing we can do is to make it read-only so that nobody else can modify the log data. Another way is to set up a centralized log server to which log data from local hosts is forwarded. So this way, for example, something happens to the local machines with the log data, we still have another copy of log information on the centralized log server. No matter what we do, it's always important to back up the log data. So for example, for the centralized log server, of course you have to do your own backups, and also maybe the local hosts too. And sometimes log data is required to be retained for an extended period of time. So retention is really important because of the requirements in these laws and regulations, mainly for auditing purposes. So especially if you're a large corporation, maintaining your log data and keep the log data for a predefined period of time is critical. So you cannot just simply delete the log data anymore. So the retention is important. And then once you're done with the log data, of course, you would destroy the log data. But when you destroy the log data, of course, you have to follow the best practices of destroying the data safely so that nobody else can recover the data after your disposal of the log data.